Josh Frydenberg, welcome.
Nice to be with you, Patricia.
Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull will announce millions of dollars in funding for the Snowy Hydro 2.0 tomorrow. What more can you tell us about what he plans to do?
Well, the Prime Minister is the first political leader in Australia to put storage of renewables seriously on the agenda, and Snowy 2.0 is a key part of our government's plan in that regard. Tomorrow he'll be making another visit to Snowy, checking on the progress of the feasibility study that's currently underway. But this is a game-changing project, one that will provide a 50% boost to the capacity of the Snowy project and enough new power to support 500,000 homes.
OK, but one of the critiques so far is that, the most that you've committed is sort of a feasibility study. Will we see more meat on the bones on this proposal?
Well, that's what the feasibility study is working through. It's looking at all the permutations and combinations of the engineering and economic analysis that you need for a project of this size. So you cannot forego a feasibility study. It's a key part of the process, but as a government, we're absolutely committed to it.
And he'll make an announcement about more money to show that that commitment is real?
Well, look, the announcement about the money to actually make this project happen only occurs after the feasibility study is complete, but certainly we are investing significantly in the feasibility study itself, and we look forward to its outcomes.
The government obviously wants to change the conversation away from dual citizenship and same-sex marriage and everything else, and we hear that this week is the week of energy. The biggest issue in energy is this 50th recommendation from the Finkel report on whether you will have a clean energy target. Will you? Was this going to be part of this week's announcement?
Well, it's the biggest issue for you, Patricia.
Well, no, it is. Hello, it's the biggest issue. I don't think it's the biggest issue for me. It's the biggest issue for you, isn't it?
Hello, Patricia. There is no silver bullet to lowering energy prices, and you're right that the 50th recommendation of the clean energy target is an important subject that's been working through by the government. But there are a number of other things that are currently being undertaken by the government to reduce power prices. We've now put in place a mechanism to restrict gas exports, and given that gas is setting the price of electricity, that's critical, and we're already starting to see a fall in the spot price for gas. The Prime Minister called in the retailers just a few weeks ago and got significant commitments from them as to how they'll make more information available to customers to allow them to more easily move contracts and retailers and save more than $1,000 a year. And we're also reining in the companies that control the poles and the wires, which could be worth billions of dollars every year to the Australian consumer.
Well, that's what you're already doing, but if you want to put the focus on energy this week, will you be able to explain to the public what your time frame is, at least, for making a determination on this clean energy target and whether it will include coal?
Well, Dr Finkel himself put a time frame on his clean energy target, which was 2020, more than 2 years
But the commitment to it I'm talking about. Well, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but as you know, there are a lot of considerations that go into a commitment of that kind, and that involves detailed analysis, which the government still is undertaking. And
politics.
Well, politics are a part of every policy decision on the Hill, but ultimately good policy makes good politics. OK,
so when will you make a decision? Because we've just seen now the Victorian government move towards determining their clean energy target, one that I know you've criticised. But how can you expect the states not to try and provide some certainty to business and move forward if the government's sort of not giving any timeline? I mean, unless you can correct the record for when you will give business some certainty.
Well, the decision by Victoria was very regrettable indeed, and it's been called a dog's breakfast by the Grattan Institute, and it follows down the path of South Australia, of states going it alone.
Sure, but I have to clarify something. The Grattan Institute also said, but they understood why they'd made this decision because there was an inaction at the federal level.
But the Victorian government actually announced last year in June that they were going to legislate this state-based target, which has been criticised by the Chamber of Commerce, the Business Council, Energy Users Association, the Australian Energy Council, the list goes on. They made that decision and that announcement last June, nothing to do with the clean energy target. And even back then they said it would lead to a higher electricity prices. Now they're claiming it will lead to lower prices. I don't think they know if they're Arthur or they're Martha.
So you don't believe it will lead to lower prices?
Not their policy, no.
So what will you do? Because you haven't provided a national plan. We know that some other states clearly want to go down this road too. What can you possibly do?
Well, as I said, we've recently got the clean energy target and the rest of the Finkel recommendations from the Chief Scientist after an 8-month report. In record time, we've accepted 49 of those recommendations, and they were very significant, like an extended notice of closure period for large-scale generators, a requirement that wind and solar provide their own backup. We got the support of the states and the territories on to those 49 proposals, and now there's a timeline for implementation, which is being undertaken by the Energy Security Board. And the 50th recommendation, the clean energy target, is actively being considered by the Turnbull government right now.
We know that some MPs, Tony Abbott, others, want you to build a power station. Are you going to do it?
Well, look, the party room is a broad church. Everyone gets their opportunity to share their thoughts. But we want more power stations built. And by the way,
are you going to do it?
Well, we are technology neutral to what is built, so it doesn't matter for me if it's a new high-efficiency, low-emission coal-fired power station or a gas-fired power station, or indeed more wind and solar with storage. But the key is affordability. That's where we differ from Bill Shorten. He's gone missing, and Mark Butler, over recent days when Victoria has gone it alone. They've gone missing when the pressure comes to bear on Victoria to unlock its own gas reserves. We are the government with the plan that we are now putting in place.
Let's move on to some other issues. Today, Dan Tehan was on Sky and compared Labor's economic policies to Cuba, Matthias Cormann to East Germany. Are you honestly trying to tell the Australian public that the Labor Party is going to turn us into a communist state?
Well, I think both Dan and Matthias are making the important point that Bill Shorten thinks that he can float into government by mimicking Corbyn in the United Kingdom or Sanders in the United States.
So, yeah, being left-wing.
No.
So use the correct language, right?
It's more than left-wing. It's actually no longer seeking to grow the pie, but just simply to redistribute the pie. And what Matthias Cormann said in his, I think, very comprehensive speech was that Bill Shorten is starting to use the politics and the language of envy.
Which is different to creating a communist state with communist policies. It clearly is an exaggeration. It wouldn't pass the fact checkers, would it?
No, but if your point is that you want to grow the pie, like Hawke and Keating did, and like we in the Turnbull government have done, and Abbott before us and John Howard before him, then you can actually get a better Australia. And that's why we've had 26 years of continuous economic growth. But if you're going to pursue, as Bill Shorten is doing, a tax and spend approach, higher taxes on businesses.
So you would use the same language. You think East Germany, Cuba is appropriate?
Look,
you think the public's going to buy that?
I think the public will be looking to their policies, not simply the language that is used to describe them. And those policies that Labor is pursuing speak for themselves because...
Are left-wing policies, but are they communist?
They're more than left-wing. They're actually dangerously populist, and they will take Australia down an economic path of less jobs, lower investment and certainly lower levels of growth.
You mentioned Tony Abbott there in a list of Prime Ministers. He's taken a fresh swipe at your government and he said that basically there's economic irresponsibility in the way that the budget's been handled and a moral failing. Is there a moral failing?
No.
Why is he saying there is?
Well, I haven't seen the context of his report.
Story in The Australian this weekend.
Okay, well...
It's in a new book. He's made these comments.
Okay, well, the point... I look forward to reading his book as
it's
I
not
look...
his book.
Well, I read Battle Lines and I enjoyed that. Look, the point is the Turnbull government has got on with the job of governing and very effectively. Our tax cuts, the work that we've done around the industrial relations agenda. Michaela Cash has done a terrific job with whether it's the ABCC or the registered organisations bills, or whether the work that we've done to protect owner-operator truck drivers or volunteer firefighters in Victoria.
So the way Tony Abbott describes the sort of handling of the budget is inaccurate?
Well, I think those comments are off the mark.
Just on these history discussions we're having, the PM compared the discussion around statues to Stalinism. Again, Stalinism, Cuba, I don't know where we're living. I thought it was a sort of open capitalist economy the last time I checked and went shopping or, went to a business. Is there really truth in that?
Well, I think the Prime Minister, and I read his Facebook post and sent it around widely, because I think he made the powerful point that we should be debating our history, not defacing it. And that
obviously defacing is outrageous, but the point about what the plaque says.
Well, the defacing of those statues came just days after a number of councils sought to change their citizenship ceremonies from what has traditionally been Australia Day to some other date. Now, we as a government totally reject that. The history of every country has its imperfections, but we should be debating that history, and I am very proud of Australia's history, but obviously very conscious of what it has meant for our Indigenous population.
Okay, the Northern Territory Chief Minister said the Territory Government would also try to change the way that things are managed, still keep Australia Day. He hasn't moved away from that, but he does want the Australia Day to highlight the lasting trauma of Indigenous dispossession. Would that be a good thing to do?
Well, I think there's a lot of good work that's being done around reconciliation and trying to, lift the standard of living for our Indigenous population and recognise them as being the first Australians. I think that.
And more of that on Australia Day?
Look, I think I absolutely include Aboriginals and their communities at the front and the centre of celebrating our continuous, successful, vibrant, harmonious and tolerant democracy.
Just very quick questions just on some issues that are going around. We now have the largest electoral roll in federation. Is that a complete own goal by the coalition? Because they're largely a lot of young people. We assume, if you look at the public polling, that they, in favour of same-sex marriage, often young people, not really conservative voters. Have you just done yourself some damage in some marginal seats?
I don't believe so.
Really?
Because
I'm not sure if any demographer would agree with you.
Well, firstly, why are people enrolling? It's because they feel passionate about the issue that's going to be the subject of the postal plebiscite, namely same-sex marriage, and more people who participate in that plebiscite, the better. As for our parliamentary system of democracy and compulsory voting, I think that's one of our great strengths. I look to the United States or other European capitals where they don't have compulsory voting.
Even if it hurts you at the next election, which I think it could?
Well, I think our ability to get as many people as possible to participate in the elections when they come around at a state level every 4 years or a federal level every 3 years is good news for both governments and opposition, because it gives more people a stake in the outcome, increasing people's understanding and belief in politics.
Quick one on this, but because I know Alan Tudge has been talking about it all day, these drug trials for welfare recipients. I just want to know if you're willing to be drug tested when you turn up to work in the morning.
Tomorrow, bring it on.
So you do it?
If somebody wanted to, I've got nothing to hide. I mean, I can't tell you I drink too much. I would have, only probably a couple of beers a week if I'm lucky, but I've never been near the naughty stuff.
Okay, so that means happy to do it, maybe to set an example? Because a lot of people say you've got a double standard, the way that the Parliament's being run and what you expect of welfare recipients.
I actually think these drug trials for welfare recipients is a very positive step forward. But as for me, there's nothing to hide.
Josh Frydenberg, thanks for coming in.
Good to be with you.